Well, on BBC Radio 4, Graham Easton continues to experience his extra senses. This week he puts his sense of balance to the test and discovers why, as a species, we tend to be a bit wobbly.
I first noticed problems with my balance in 1999. Well, I was crossing a footbridge near my work one day and I looked up at the horizon and it bounced.
Balance is the greatest achievement of the human species. Many of my neuroscience colleagues would contend and say that it's actually human language, but I'd say it's really balance.
It's hard to think of balance as our greatest achievement. You should have seen me stumbling around an ice rink the other weekend, and we certainly look pretty ungainly compared to these fantastic Geldy's monkeys here at London Zoo. They've all come over to have a look to see what I'm doing, and they're swinging effortlessly through the treetops and strolling cockily along the wispy branches at the top. In the second programme in this series of Extra Senses, I'm exploring our sense of balance. The monkeys may sound pleased with themselves, but to me it's not really something for us to shout about. In fact, it feels like a bit of a sensory embarrassment compared to, say, our hearing or our sight. Compared with the monkeys, balancing on two legs allowed us humans to do clever things with our hands. But without a leg at each corner, it left us looking decidedly wobbly. Ramesh Balasubramanian studies human kinetics at the University of Ottawa in Canada.
As bipedal animals, the human body by nature is a really unstable system, so we have to try very hard to keep our muscles and various senses working together so we can stand upright. Any little perturbation and the body could go plop.
None of us want to go plop if we can possibly help it. But although just standing up might not seem much of a challenge, balancing a heavy head on top of two long, bendy legs is no pushover.
Standing is remarkably complex because just about every muscle in your body is involved. There's no particular pattern in which these muscles have to be turned on and off. And it's remarkably complex because there's multiple senses that interact with balance itself.
So it seems that although we call it our sense of balance, we should really describe it as our senses of balance. Just avoiding falling over takes some pretty elaborate sensory teamwork. To give me some idea of what these senses are and how they work together, I went to meet neurologist Adolfo Bronstein. He felt the best way to show me was to put my balance to the test in a spinning chair surrounded by a circular tent.
We are now in the vestibular or balance laboratory in Charing Cross Hospital, and we are showing you now a rotating chair, which we use to understand how the balance system works and also what happens to patients who have balance problems.
My first impression, I'm afraid, is that it looks like an electric chair, very metal, quite harsh, lots of wires coming out of it. Looks a bit scary. It's not going to do anything harmful?
I don't think so, because this is relatively brief and mild, and we use with patients every week.
So I just come on here. So I'm sitting upright, I've got my head in the headrest, feet restrained in the little cage. And I think
Tell me when you want to go in the dark.
Okay, I'm ready for the dark.
Okay, I'm going to turn the lights off.
Okay.
Okay, just look out, we're going to start to turn. Here we go.
Okay, and I just keep looking. Oh, blimey.
Because I was in the pitch dark, I had no clues from my eyes as to what was happening. Then, when the chair suddenly stopped, I had the most bizarre experience.
Oh, wow. I'm going completely the other way, really fast.
But if you try to touch the curtain around you...
It's still. What a peculiar feeling. That's the most strange thing I've done. So although I'm completely stationary, it feels like I'm spinning round in the opposite direction.
That is because when you are spinning round, you are also spinning round the little organs called semicircular canals in your inner ear. So those organs are made up of a little tube or canals filled up with a fluid inside. So when you go round and round, there is movement, relative movement between the fluid inside and the tube. As you keep going and going, after half a minute or so, both the tubes and the fluid are going at the same speed. Then when we stop you, The fluid inside your inner ear kept moving, as it were,
yes.
but your tubes didn't. And so the movement of the fluid against the tubes in the inner ear made you feel again that you were turning.
But in the opposite direction now.
Exactly
Yes.
in the opposite direction.
Yes.
Yes.
And so these are crucial organs when it comes to balance.
They are crucial organs for balance and for perception of movement in general. They are at right angles, like a very sophisticated gyroscope, really, like 3 sets of gyroscopes that indicate movement, rotation in the 3 important planes in space.
It was a dramatic demonstration of the powerful messages our inner ear can send to our brain, and how much we usually rely on what our eyes tell us about where we are. Most of the time, fortunately, we take those messages for granted. We only notice our sense of balance when it goes wrong. Take 37-year-old Steve Geary, for example. He realised something wasn't right when the horizon seemed to bounce on his way to work. Gradually, he noticed more and more peculiar symptoms which affected his balance, his vision and his hearing.
I hear my heartbeat as a thud, thud, thud all the time, constantly. But I guess, you just zone it out after a while. When I read and move my eyes, I'll hear a squeak with every move of the eyeball in the socket. It's quite bizarre. With regard to the balance, if I turn around too quick, I'll stumble and fall over, which I did in a shop in West London once and smashed their display accidentally.
Steve's bizarre symptoms baffled the doctors for quite a time, until he was referred to Professor Bronstein's lab and discovered that he had what's known as Tullio's syndrome.
It's very rare, and it's essentially like a little hole in the semicircular canals, so that these semicircular canals, which are organs of balance, as we are discussing here today, become very sensitive to sound or to pressures within the body. I think that Steve will tell you that when he goes up and down airplanes, he can feel very dizzy, or in response to loud sounds, he can feel very disoriented, and his eyes will jump up and down, and he will see the world jumping up and down.
I can hum at a specific frequency, and it will resonate and make my eyes move massive amounts. And they sampled that frequency, and it turned out they thought it could be middle C, which is bizarre. The sound comes in through the top where there's no bone and wiggles the superior semicircular canal, which makes my body think it's falling over, so my eyes compensate, but of course I'm not moving. When it's dark, I sort of lose a lot of visual reference, so I'm a bit wobbly. I look like someone that's had a drink.
What was happening to Steve shows how intimate the connection is between the organs of balance in the ear and information from our eyes. Our sense of balance clearly relies heavily on both our vision and the delicate gyroscope in our inner ear, the so-called vestibular system. But, as Ramesh Balasubramanian explained to me, there's even more to it than that.
Proprioception is really the last part of the puzzle. So in addition to the visual system and the vestibular system informing us about where we are with respect to the environment, it's sort of interesting to realize that if you're standing still with your eyes closed, we don't really fall over. And this is really because we have yet another sense, which is proprioception, or the muscular sense. The muscular sense is picked up by a variety of things like muscle stretch receptors, tendon organs, and so every time you make a movement, the brain is informed of where you are with respect to the environment through the muscular sense or proprioception.
So every time we just stand around, we're using our vision, our inner ears, and this muscle sense to stop us keeling over. That's impressive enough, but some people have really mastered this balance thing. The ballerina is the queen of balance. Watching the English National Ballet rehearsing, I couldn't help marvelling at their poise and athleticism and at my lumbering lack of grace. So afterwards, I asked dancer Jenna Lee to give me a few tips on sharpening up my balancing act.
Okay, well, do you fancy trying a pirouette? I suppose that's
Yes, definitely.
an ultimate
I practice this in the
ballerina.
kitchen. My wife's a former dancer, so we practice these sorts of
fantastic.
things in the kitchen quite a lot.
So when you turn, the most important thing is to spot, because you trick your brain that it's staying in one place. Because if we didn't spot, you get so dizzy that you wouldn't be able to turn.
Right, so you don't look all the way around,
No,
you just
so
fix
you
on one place.
fix on one place, you turn so far, you leave your head and you whip it back round again to kind of trick the brain. And people who are really good can do that kind of 6-7 times the go. But
Without falling over when
we'll
you
go
walk
with
on.
one today.
Yeah.
Obviously you can work on this at home with your wife. Okay, so you start
Okay.
in, this is 5th position, it's a basic ballet position. You need 2 feet,
Yeah.
it's really important, 2 feet.
I've got 2 feet, yeah.
Right, 2 feet, check.
Yeah, check.
So you need to go clear and go. That wasn't quite the right leg, but it was the right action.
Oh, it's the other leg, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the other leg, so
leg.
that's actually very clever.
Yeah. Special version. So, do you ever have such a thing as a bad balance day? And, you know, when you get that, what do you do to get yourself back on track?
Bad balance days are common. I think you need to go back to the basics. As a child, you're taught that you have a line going right down your centre and say to yourself, are my shoulders on top of my hips, which are on top of my feet? Because your head is so heavy as well. We do a lot of movement with the head and back bends and whatever. So that's really hard. You do need to counterbalance that. So go back to the basics and check that everything's in line.
I mean, the other thing, obviously, is you must have some sense of spatial awareness when you're dancing in a corps. You know, when you have a team of people.
Yeah, in a big team, I think, especially in something kind of famous like Swan Lake, it's very important for the girls to know exactly who's in front, who's behind. They can see the girls coming on the side, if they might have to adjust to walk forward a little bit.
And when you've got, say, your hands behind you, which you can't see, you've got to know exactly how far up they are, what angle they're at. So you've got to feel your awareness of where it is.
That's quite hard, actually, especially when you're talking about sometimes it needs to be as precise as literally half an inch. But that just comes with repetition, really, doing it over and over again.
I mean, I imagine doing it over and over again is key to it. But if we're thinking about balance in general, do you think that it's important to have an innate ability to be at your level?
You have to start quite young, I think, working on stuff like balance. I think you get past a certain age where, you know, your muscles are set really for life, and you're not really going to change that much. It all happens in very early years, I think. Stuff like
I've blown my
flexibility.
chance now.
I mean, it would take a lot of hard work, I think.
If ever that, you know, any one of the boys isn't well or anything, just give us a call.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much
No
for showing us
problem.
that.
I'm now thinking that balance really is one of our most impressive achievements, as a species at least. We may not all have the skill of a ballet dancer, but each one of us is brimming with a sophisticated array of balanced senses. Vision in itself breathtakingly complex, the inner ear canals like tiny spirit levels, and even special sensors in our muscles and tendons. But I guess some of us are just better at putting them to good use than others.
So that's kind of a very simple move.
That's quite difficult, yeah. Like that.
Yeah, you need to leave your head, that's really important.
I feel a bit dizzy because I didn't do the squatting.
Yeah, we're struggling.
Extra Senses was presented by Graham Easton and produced by Michelle Martin. If you'd like any more information or advice about balance problems, call the Radio 4 Action line on 0800 044 044. That's 0800 044 044.